My goodness. I don't think I need to say anything anymore. Wonderful introductions. Ernie, I have to thank you so much for all you have done. You and the National Herbarium. George, who is here, George Argus, who's here. All the help that you gave me at the beginning of working on this project all these many years ago. And Ludga, who has been an absolute source of assistance and has held my hand and done all kinds of jobs for me for his oldest student, because I think I was when I started. I was 49 years old when I agreed to do this, and I have just had my 78th birthday. I've been working on it. It's so wonderful to see so many new and old faces, old friends here. I can't tell you how much pleasure it gives me to see you all. Many people to thank, of course, for this. Apart from the herbarium and McGill, also extend it to the whole of the Mullivili family, who have been absolutely wonderful. Lena suffered all summer, his wife, on doing the index. And Rania has struggled with maps and illustrations. I have someone here who helped me, David Parker, who helped me with my computer problems. And the list goes on and on. Bill Barr, certainly, at the Arctic Institute of North America. When I sent him the manuscript, it was at a point when I had actually been turned down by another institute that I will not name, and told that no publisher in Canada would ever touch this book. So to say that I was slightly discouraged was an understatement. And he took the manuscript. He said he loved it. He thought it would be just what he wanted for his Northern series, and it would be done with the University of Calgary Press, who could not have been nicer to work with. They've all been absolutely fantastic. So when I talk about all these people to whom I owe thanks, I have to tell you that I've started calling it our book, not mine. Anyway, on to aspects of it. I did not know Erling Porsild. I knew of the book that he had done, the flora he had done of the continent, of the islands to the north when I went to Baffin Island. I knew he had an interest in edible wild plants, which was what I was studying at the time. But I didn't know him. Now, how do you start a biography of somebody you don't know? And I figured I'd have to do it like a jigsaw puzzle. I don't know if anybody else does jigsaw puzzles, but you start with the outside edges, and then you start with the colors, and you form them into themes. And then you fit the themes in together as you go along, and then you reach a point where these blanks, and you need to find that one elusive piece that's going to fit into it. That seemed to be the best way to me to go about it. So the first part of the puzzle, which was to define it, was to go to the correspondence, which was voluminous but accessible to me thanks to Ernie. And I was able to go through and work through it all. I gave myself, as my aborder, the National Herbarium, the 1920s and 30s, post-McCown years, with Malty, Oscar Malty, and then Erling Porsild picking it up 1935 to his retirement in 1967. One of the things that I noticed about that period was how unknown our flora was, especially our northern flora. So that the work that was needed was to go out, to get into places that were basically very inaccessible, and make collections, bring them back and classify them. And that seemed to be a real necessity. But we are talking about a herbarium with one botanist. Very little other help. Porcel was able to start collecting in the north through the Canadian Reindeer Project. That was the project that was going to bring reindeer to Canada, but the first objective of Finney with the Department of the Interior was to send both Porcel and his brother Robert up to Alaska, look at the Canadian reindeer, not at the Canadian, the Alaskan reindeer industry, look at what was needed to run it, what the animals needed for pasturage, and then to check out the Northwest Territories to see if the pasturage was adequate or even better than adequate in order to support a reindeer herd of our own. So that was the first objective of that. And the Porcel boys went up and they did a very good job of it. They eventually, it meant that in October 1929, when the crash was falling in New York, Erling Porcel was up in Alaska buying Canada's reindeer herd. 2,500 or so animals that had to be trekked over the Brooks Range to the Mackenzie River Delta, to the East Branch, where both the Porcels had actually worked on creating Reindeer Station. The drive was supposed to take a year. The deer did not arrive until 1935. And Erling Porcel was quoted as saying if they hadn't come then, they'd have taken him out in a box because it was such a long, long, long wait for the deer to come. Meanwhile, he had other instructions. He had instructions from this museum about what he had to do when he was up there. What the instructions were, they can come down in one word: collect. Anderson wanted him to collect mammals. Taverna wanted him to collect birds. Jeunesse wanted him to collect artifacts of human history. And Malty, of course, said plants. Great, great numbers of plants. So, if we fill in the next part of our jigsaw puzzle, we come to the herbarium. And I do have to tell you, I did want to say one thing, that when Erling Porcel was hired, we were incredibly lucky. Imagine that we got a young man who had been thoroughly trained at his father ran the Danish Arctic Research Station for Greenland. He was thoroughly familiar with the North. He was thoroughly familiar with the flora of that area. And not only that, he had gone to Denmark and he had studied under Ostenfeld, who was also an Arctic specialist. Coming to Canada, he could bring that with him as a starting point. I wanted actually this to be 2 books. I wanted to have The Reindeer Botanist as book number 1, and then Mr. Porcel of the Museum as book number 2. And they told me I couldn't do it. So this is why you have a book that you can break your toe on if you're not careful about how you handle it. But Mr. Porcel in the herbarium, as I said, you have one man struggling away, struggling through the Depression years when there wasn't much money, struggling with his own problems of being recognized with without that piece of scholastic paper that would make him a PhD. Although he had the knowledge, he didn't have the piece of paper. And then came the war, by which point we now have half a botanist, because he is seconded to the consular service in Greenland, and he goes there in the summers and is back at the herbarium in the winter. And one of the things I found is really fascinating about this period was what was going on in Ottawa during those years. And the herbarium had a terrible time. It was being moved around all over the place because they needed offices for the war effort. So that was really very interesting to see what Ottawa was like in that particular period. End of the war, and all of a sudden things changed. You had expansion in the herbarium, things could settle down, you could really do things. And I would, in what I can think of for the Porcelain era, the most exciting time was probably 1959, when they had the first International Botanical Congress. And all of the staff were involved in that, and it was a huge success story for botany in Canada, and a wonderful way to go out, really, in a sense. Porcelain by then had become a man who was all very important in anything to do with Northern affairs, with the Arctic Circle, with the Arctic Institute of North America, with advice on all hands, and honors began to pour in, including his very happy university degree that he finally got from Copenhagen in 1955. So I think I just kind of touched on points, but you can fill in a lot more of these things with things to do with his family, all of these other little pieces that can be fitted into that whole picture of it. But it was a very fascinating jigsaw puzzle to do. And I thank you, Ernie, very much for setting me off on it. It changed my life in ways I was never expecting, and I didn't know where it would take me. But I have enjoyed it. I hope you will enjoy meeting him in the covers of the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Wow, that was quite the jigsaw puzzle. I think that was probably larger than any jigsaw puzzle any of us have tackled. So well done. And I expect everybody here is going to want to have an opportunity to speak with you afterwards during our informal reception, which will be taking place out in the Stone Gallery. But we also have with us here Dr. Christopher Byrne, who holds an NSERC Northern Research Chair in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Carleton University. And he edited the book Herschel Island, Kikaterjuak, A Natural and Cultural History of Yukon's Arctic Island. And he'll also be signing his book out in the reception area. So a real treat for us to have both Wendy and Christopher here to speak with us all, share their experiences and stories of creating respective jigsaw puzzles. So thank you all for joining us, and I encourage you to join us out for an informal reception and opportunities to get the book and probe further and ask more questions. So thank you, everyone.